Dr. James Crosby. Welcome to Conscious, and thank you very much for joining us. It's really good to have you here. It's nice to see your face.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Philippa. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
So tell me what you do first.
So my official job title is that I'm head of sustainability at a company called Advantage Utilities. What that really means is that we have businesses who are looking to hit net zero, become net zero by 2030 in some cases, 2050 by every case. And what we have to do is put them a roadmap which makes it doable, but also makes it economically viable. Because at the end of the day, we need to balance the cost of becoming net zero with the benefits that net zero hold.
Now, am I right that the majority of businesses you're working with are small businesses?
I would say that it actually really, really varies. So our company works with SME sectors for approximately 60% of the time. So that would be
that's
mum and dad's
small, medium
enterprises.
Yeah.
So that would be mum and dad's fish and chip shop. That could be a local car dealership. And then it goes right the way up to big national data centers. So we really do, as a company, encompass every single type of business, which is why when people ask me what I do, I say I assist people with their transition to net zero for businesses, big and small. And I really mean it.
Okay. I'm guessing now that very often the question you're asked, and the first question I'm going to ask you is, given the cost of living crisis that we are now enduring, is net zero now a luxury?
That is a really good question. And it's a question that I answer with a really easy philosophy. The greenest method of consumption is the cheapest method of consumption. And also, the electricity that you do not consume at all is also the cheapest form of electricity. Therefore, what we're looking to do is make it such that people can install this technology, decrease their running costs, and decrease their carbon emissions, and help with their cost of living crisis.
It's a win-win, is what I like to call it. That's when I'm asked about it, I'll say, yeah, it's a win-win situation here.
Absolutely. Well, it's one of those things where people think, oh, if it's green, it must be expensive. It sounds like a luxury good. And in reality, there's been some good movements in wholesale markets and supply chains that now mean that these green technologies are now the cheapest technologies.
Interesting. So even, there's so many aspects to sustainability. And obviously one of those is cutting down our energy use. And you can see very clearly that that would be a win-win. But then very often when we're talking about new technologies like installing solar or a ground source heat pump or all of those technologies that have become available to us, it seems like those kinds of things are the huge investment and where it starts to get expensive.
It is what the real biggest market failure in all of this is. We've got economies of scale at place. So if you're a big business, then you can get things relatively cheaper at larger scale because you've got greater purchasing power. You've got labor. Well, labor's the biggest cost in all of this. So if you've already got people on site, the amount of time they're at site decreases over time. And so does the enabling works, such as application fees, scaffold costs. All of this is one big upfront cost. So if you're able to have a large project where these costs don't really vary that much, then you get these economies of scales. It's the smaller SME enterprises that are really squeezed because they have a smaller project. Therefore, they don't get these economies of scale. So when you do get to a certain size, it almost becomes a luxury. It's so scalable, but not scalable to benefit everyone.
What we're hearing about constantly is that a huge amount of small businesses in particular are being squeezed so hard that they are running out of steam. They're losing the business. How does that make life for you? How is that impacting your working life?
What I would say is every single client, every single business, every single person needs to be approached in isolation You can't think, oh, you're in this particular sector, therefore you have this particular business profile, therefore I will approach this conversation in a certain way. When you find out about these businesses, they're all getting squeezed. What you need to find out is, what are you motivated by? What do you need? Is it all about running costs? Is it about environment? Is it about making yourself transparently aware so that people are more likely to do business with you? And based on that, based on these very client-specific conversations, that's when we can begin to have the conversation about, okay, we can't squeeze you. We actually just need to make this absolutely optimized for what you need. And maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, if the economy recovers, if your cash flow is better, or you've got more confidence in your future, then we can look at some of the more added value services. But for now, if this is what you've got to work with, this is your best solution. And it's all about making it that one tailored specific focus on a person by person basis.
What's your favorite story so far? What's a favorite business that you've had a big impact on?
You know what? Without saying names, it was like an old working man's club that is now a local, just a local social house in the Welsh Valleys, South Wales, and the two people were just so lovely. It was a wife and a man and a husband team, and they said, "Look, we really want to put solar on our roof, but we're not sure. Like, how does it work?" And they were just so lovely. And we managed to get it all together, and we got it to the final stages. And it turns out they have a tiled roof. Tiled roofs are very specifically minded with the laborers that can work on them, because they're a different skill set to say if you've got a metal roof or some kind of like flat roof system. Tile roofs require bespoke workmanship. So we got there. We were ready to go ahead with the project. And unfortunately, the principal contractor said to us, "Unfortunately, I haven't got any labor availability for another 4 to 5 months." And this husband and wife team were like, "No, we were so excited to show the local community about the new solar panels we're putting in, how we're giving back, and it's kind of a social help for everyone." So we said, "Oh no, we need to do something about this. A, because these people are absolutely lovely, and B, they're so invested in the community. We need to make this happen." So we ended up going out to, I think it was, so they're based in South Wales, and we managed to find someone that was in Birmingham that had availability for the following month. And because we'd already done the legislation, we'd already got the pricing formalized, heck, the company had already submitted their deposit for the project. We were like, no! So we managed to relocate these tile-specific installation team. They were able to get it on the roof, and they were happy as Larry. They were so happy. And it's one of the smallest projects I've ever worked on, but it's really one of those that really sticks in your mind.
I thought you were going to say, so I zipped up my suit and up I went.
I can't even put up a curtain rail in my own house.
So what's your driver? What's your motivation? I mean, are you in this because you care about the environment? I know a bit of your background. I mean, you went to Cambridge and studied earth sciences and geology, which is the really hard part, isn't it? I found about the earth sciences stuff.
So
and geophysics too.
Yeah. Pardon, can you say that last bit again for me? I overspoke, which is
geophysics. So tell me where your motivation comes from. I mean, clearly those subjects are passion for you.
So my biggest passion was, I'll bring it back to when I was doing my A-level. So I was in a really fortunate position where I could study chemistry as an A-level, but I also had the option to study geology. So I studied both of those as two of my 4 A-levels. And I always loved chemistry. From year 9 through to year 11, I loved chemistry, and I went into A-levels thinking I can't wait to become a chemist at university. And I took geology, and what I realized was that it's the ultimate interdisciplinary science. I understand a bit of chemistry. I understand a little bit of biology through like paleoevolution. It's all in the rock record at the end of the day. And I understood a little bit about geophysics. So I ended up really quite focusing in on from an early age. When I was 18, I went to university to study geochemistry. I did a master's degree in geochemistry, and I ended up doing my PhD in geochemistry. I'm very lucky. I knew what I wanted to do from a young age. And what really caught my mind is that the geological time record is, 4.56 billion years. That's how old the Earth is based on our geochemical analyses. And what we're able to do over that time period is collate proxy records of what atmospheric temperature used to be, what did CO2 levels used to be, based on what is preserved in the rock record, and then you can make proxy. A proxy means that if I know what this is, then I know what the other one is. Therefore, if I take it back through time, I know what this is because I've definitely got one of the measurements. And what we saw is that this is now going back to the early days of the 1960s, that we are really dramatically increasing CO2 rates. And we know that CO2 and other greenhouse gases are really, really directly correlated with atmospheric global temperature. And we know that atmospheric global temperature is very closely related to sea levels, related to oxygen anoxia, and related to habitability. And when I saw, so I personally studied over the last 3 billion years or so, and I really looked at what are the major fluctuations over these 3 billion year timescales. And I looked at what has happened in the past 1,000 years, let alone the past 100 years. I thought, wow, you know what? There's so many great minds that are already researching all these different past events. What I really want to do is now take my mind and try and influence the future events. So in a quite self-indulgent way, I decided to turn myself into industry and say, look, we know what the problem is. We've been studying the problem for such a long time. We've got solutions, and the solutions are going to become more ubiquitous. So let's get integrating that into the everyday economy, make the world more environmentally friendly, and try and really limit that warming to less than 2 degrees Celsius globally. So that's my motivation.
So this is really heart and soul for you.
I devoted 8 years of my life to studying it, and now I want to devote my career to making a difference. Yeah, I live and breathe it, I would say, much to my fiance's displeasure sometimes, especially when it comes to buying a new car, which we are at the moment. And I'm quite dogmatic about the kind of car I want. And she's like, do you not feel like you want to make some compromises? And I'm like, no, I know what I want.
And what is that? Tell us, what is that you want?
So I want a hybrid diesel car. Now, most people realize that diesel is quite pollutive. The reason I want a hybrid diesel car is because I know that we can integrate diesel technology with hydro-treated vegetable oil, and HVO has 90% less emissions than traditional diesel. And say places like Esso are now introducing 25-75 blends, which is 75% traditional diesel, 25% HVO, which has got 19% less emissions. So look, I talk a lot of talk. This is my opportunity to start walking the walk by having a HVO-ready hybrid battery system. That's my angle.
We heard it from the expert right here. So I don't know if you know that I drive EV.
You know what? I think EV is a massive part of the future. I don't have a home carport that I can charge it from. I have street side parking, and I know there's places in London where you could, literally outside of where I work in West London, you've got street side parking, literally on the telephone posts. I live in Oxford. They haven't integrated that kind of technology yet. Otherwise, I would be going fully electric as well.
Interesting. So talk to me then. Let's just rewind a little bit. You were talking about how you studied the last 3 billion years. No mean feat.
To the best of my ability, yes.
Not like on a day-to-day basis, obviously. But remind us, just so we get that sense of perspective, when we came along in those last 3 billion years, when humans decided to arrive on the scene.
All right, so the best analogy I've heard, and the one that we quite often will teach to when we go and do outreach events, is if you get an entire roll of toilet paper and completely unroll it from start to finish, you're less than the last half square.
Well, we all are.
So we've been around. Yeah, we all are. The square of toilet paper, less than half of it. That's the equivalent to how long humans have been around when you put it in those kind of observable contexts. And the point being is that we've not been around for that long, but we've made a really, really, really significant influence. Great. So the amount of influence we've had is akin to that of major volcanic eruptions. So we look at places like the Deccan Traps, which is partially linked to the death of the dinosaurs. Well, that's because it was a gigantic volcanic event that just spewed loads and loads and loads and loads of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere and was a major reason in why the dinosaurs died. We're having a similar effect. That's what we're doing.
And when you look at the broad span of geological time, in the billions of years, we're just a little speck. So, in one way, we are just that event that's just gone on a little bit longer than a volcano.
Yeah. I mean, that volcano erupted for something like, I think it's like 6 million years. We've been doing it for 60 years. So that's the kind of... That's the kind
really
of levels of emissions we're
perspective.
talking about.
And can we turn around? I mean, I know there are so many people that say, what's the point? What is the point in changing behavior? What is the point in doing anything? I'm just going to carry on like I am because it's too late.
So I have this conversation a lot. And there's two answers to that. There's the philosophical answer and there's the scientific answer. So I'll start boring and I'll start with science. So scientifically, we can do something about it. So we've hit the point of no return. The point of no return is that we have caused warming, and we are on a trajectory where we will continue to warm the planet. Now what we're trying to do is make sure that we only warm it by a certain degree Celsius, which is why we've got a target of 1.5 or 2.5, and that's why we've got net zero. Because when we hit net zero, we've got no more emissions, therefore we're not contributing anymore to the global warming feedback cycle. So the answer is we can totally do something about it. Like if we do nothing at all about it, then it'll really get bad. But if we do something about it now, which we are doing, which I believe we actively are doing, we can limit how bad it will be, and it will be bad within reason under IPCC models. Philosophically is a different question, and I always have one key philosophy. Always keep fighting the good fight. This is the good fight. The good fight is to look after the planet. We only get one planet Earth, regardless of what other people may say. Like within our lifetimes, within our children's lifetimes, we're likely to only have one Earth. Therefore, the good fight is to look after it and to do what we can do within what we can do. Therefore, fight the good fight.
Nice. What are your biggest challenges then? I mean, do businesses tend to come to you, or do you go to them and say, hey, I'm wagging my finger, you need to make some changes?
So if I did that, no one would ever want to work with me ever. If I said, you are bad, sit in the corner. What you have to do is, so we've actually got so there's two ways that this happens. I'm really lucky that a lot of my work now comes as referrals, because if you do a good job once, then word of mouth spreads and people like, you want to talk to James, or you want to talk to the team at Advantage Utilities. They're doing a great job. Sorry if I had a shameless plug there. I didn't mean to. But you want to talk to the team there. And occasionally we do some prospecting. Of course we do prospecting, where we've got inbound inquiries from our websites, through our marketing activities. And then what we do is we have a 5-step system. We try and make it really simple. So we co-authored a white paper on the route to net zero and cost management. And the first step is always, as I outlined earlier with the SMEs, understand. What do you know about net zero? What do you know about energy costs? What do you know about what is out there for you? And then you just get to know who the person is, what they want, how they want to go about things. And that way you can fill in some information gaps if they don't have it. Make sure that the information that you're providing is true. Otherwise, step 1 is the last step. And then we get on to step 2, which is we need to measure it. Like if you do not know it, then you cannot do anything about it. So we like to audit, which is, what is your energy consumption? What's your greenhouse gas emissions? What's your site list? how is it all fitting together in your scope 1, 2, and even scope 3 emissions? And then the third step is, let's have a consultation. Let's talk about this. This is what our numbers are. This is what we've seen. This is where we've got scope for improvement. This is how much it may cost. These are your financing options. This is putting, what they call it, putting numerical values onto investment cases. And so basically, step 3, this is where we are. This is what you can do. This is how much it might cost. Otherwise, there's these other cost methods. What do you want to do from here? And then step 4 is what we call the get stuff done. How do we actually get stuff in there, get it delivered? This is a timeline, get it all sorted. And then we hit back to step 5, which is let's recertify you. You've done a great job. And we start over again. So we try and make it as simple as possible because there's so much noise in the net zero world. There's so much noise in the sustainability world. Let's just simplify it because there is a clear path to net zero. This is the way that we think is best to take it forward.
When you say noise, what do you mean? What kind of noise?
So it's a deregulated market at the end of the day. So I am a sustainability consultant. What I have going for me is I've got a big shiny doctorate from a big shiny university. However, I'm not a accredited sustainability consultant. I'm not an accredited net zero expert because that governing body doesn't exist. If I wanted to be a plumber, for example, then I need my plumbing certificate. I need to be a member of the Plumbers Association of the United Kingdom, for want of a better phrase. That's not actually what it's called. But to be a sustainability consultant, you don't need that. So what that means is there's a lot of people out there with a lot of ideas that mean that they can pretty much say whatever they want unregulated. And then the consequences of their actions, unless there is a clear criminal case to it, there's no risk and no repercussions. So that's a big part of the noise.
I think also on the flip side of that, we are inherently suspicious of businesses. So in terms of businesses are there to make money. And I think we are seeing a much more rounded picture of what a business can be now, but there's still an element of cynicism about motivation. Ultimately, isn't a business just there to make money? Do you think that culture is changing? Or do you think actually most people are coming to you and asking for ground zero, net zero even, because they have to, because businesses don't have a choice now?
It's a really good question. Actually, the biggest influence we see on people coming to us are their partnerships. So say, for example, you're a packaging and a logistics company, and one of your major customers who you package and distribute for is, say, a footwear company. And what they'll say is, look, we as a company have these really set sustainability goals because we are a publicly facing entity. We need to do the right thing, and our customers need to see that we're doing the right thing. Hello, supply chain. You're a part of us. We are in this together. Do your sustainability criteria match up with ours? Do you have the same roadmap planned out? And are you going to get to net zero at the same way that we are? And if you're not, then actually you're compromising our journey. And as a result, we can't work together. So the biggest one we see, to bring all that together, biggest one we see is actually internal pressures of the market towards itself to make itself more sustainable. The other one is simply, it is actually genuinely cheaper to install solar than it is to consume from the grid. So that's a big market driver as well.
So we're back to the win-win. And we've spoken here on this podcast, on the Conscious podcast, to Sarah Turner, who is... she has a very small business that she's grown from scratch called Little Bow Sheep Company. And she's using British wool to make all sorts of different products, mainly tumble dryer balls that help reduce the time in the dryer, to sum it up. And she said that she feels small businesses particularly can often lead the way, because if they're relatively new businesses, they're thinking in terms of sustainability right from the start, and because they are very much often authors of their own business, they're very much identifiable with a set of codes and values and a certain kind of culture. And she said very much that she feels as a small business, it's her responsibility to lead the way, that bigger businesses then might respond to the popularity of that kind of an ethos. Do you see that?
So I'm in a really fortunate position where every so often I get to work with startups. So startups are very akin to what you've just said before. They're a blank canvas. You know, they want to build their image, they want to build their product, they want to build their infrastructure, and they can do that with a completely blank canvas. And as a result, when you've got these newer, more innovative startups or young small businesses, they can be more sustainable because they don't have to inherit 30 years of infrastructure that was outdated to begin with and just gotten more outdated as the time's gone on. So to answer your question, these startups and young SMEs, they're the people with the blank canvas. And if they've got the resources to do it, they can paint a beautifully green picture.
Which can be beautifully mimicked, we hope, by the older and larger dinosaurs of the business world. What do you face real problems when it comes to culture as well? I mean, I'm always really interested in the culture of a business, and how do you think those things are changing? Do you ever still feel that there's a lot of resistance to change in a more sustainable direction?
Of all the variables that I've encompassed, culture is the biggest one. Like, I've seen big roofs, I've seen small roofs, I've seen big electricity demands, I've seen small ones. But nothing's greater than the attitude towards sustainability than the culture. So you can go to successful companies. They don't need to be big. They don't need to be small. It's all about the mindset of the decision makers. And if those decision makers aren't on board, then look, you're wasting your breath kind of thing. No matter how much good science you can show them, no matter how many case studies, no matter how many literal inactive systems you can show them, they just don't want to hear about it because they don't believe in it. So culture's a big part, like belief is a big part of this. And I try and take belief away because you can show it with numbers, you can show it with science that it works. On the other end of the spectrum, you can go to these companies of all kinds of sizes, and it doesn't matter who they are. They could be 75 years old, they could be 17 years old, and they are like so excited about being green, and they've got some of the best budgets for their sustainability. So yeah, that is by far the biggest variable. Do I see it changing? Yeah, because actually the money's now starting to follow it. If your main client is saying you need to do this, then that's going to speak pretty loudly than me saying the earth is on fire to them.
So within business and business to business, those voices are worth a lot. You know, those voices that are saying we need to change things actually are making a huge difference.
Yeah, big time. It's absolutely. There's not really a single point I could pin it other than the energy crisis is when everything seemed to change. Because everyone got super hyper aware of their energy costs, their energy spend, and their CO2 emissions. And when you've got both the environmental drivers and you've got the cost drivers, now we're really having a conversation. And that's when you really start to see these cultural changes, because the people that look after the purse strings are also now the people that are talking about sustainability.
Interesting. Now, when you said you got your simple 5-step plan, you mentioned number 4 was getting stuff done. And yes. What is that stuff? What is that stuff that you do? Because it's a bit like in French when Chandler goes to work and they say, "What do you actually do for your job?" You know, what is it? Just always that you need some solar panels.
And I remember the episode where. So look, the technology is broken down into two main cores. You've got the ability to become self-sufficient, generation assets, and then you've got the ability to become more efficient. So when we say self-generation, that is to offset your consumption from the grid. At the time of this recording, the grid is 0.19 kilograms of CO2 equivalency per kilowatt hour. That's dirty. It's not as dirty as it was, but it's still pollutive. So we look at, and it's also expensive. Like, we know it's expensive. You only need to look at your energy bills. So what we look to do is say, why don't we have a beyond the grid solution, a microgrid solution, so to speak, where you can generate your own electricity. And those technologies are GCSE textbooks: solar, wind, hydro. Then we can get into things like, do you have proximal space for battery storage? Do you want to do some energy arbitrage where you try and cheat the grid? Stuff like that.
Oh, I like the sound of that. Energy arbitrage.
Oh, it's amazing. So basically what you do is you get a big old battery. You get a big old battery, like a giant one, about the size of a big SUV lorry. HGV lorry, not SUV.
All right, that makes more sense.
Thinking about buying a car.
Yeah.
Yeah, big old HGV lorry. And you put it there. And it's just a really, really, really big battery, like a 1 megawatt battery, a 2 megawatt battery. And the very basic principle of energy arbitrage is daytime energy is more expensive than nighttime energy. So fill it up at nighttime, sell it during the daytime, make a bit of a profit. And then you also get peak balancing. So every so often the grid will introduce periods where they say, look, we need the grid demand to be really low at this point. Is there anything you could do about it? And what they'll say is, yeah, you know what we'll do is we'll turn off our site and just power it straight from this 1 megawatt battery. And thank you, government, you're going to give us some nice money for doing that. So those are two examples of energy arbitrage that these really big batteries are. They're still fed from the grid, but you do have a period of self-sufficiency after the fact.
So we are literally, as you said, GCSE renewables still. Is there anything else that you're seeing on the horizon that you're thinking, that is what my customers are going to need 2, 3 years, 5 years from now?
Officially on the record, I believe that air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps are going to be what solar PV is today. So solar PV about 10 years ago was moderately popular. It was a big thanks to the feed-in tariff, so you literally got paid to generate. They would give you like 8p just to generate electricity from it, and then they'd also give you a good 8p to sell it back to the grid. So you had some really good cash flow there. What's really taken solar into the next level is the panels have gotten slightly more efficient, but the cost of the panels and the inverters has come down so much. So when you've now got these lower costs and these slightly higher efficiencies, the actual technology business case for it has become so much better. Now with heat pumps, we're still very much at a point where, look, heat pumps are really great. They make heat out of electricity and ambient water and ambient temperatures, and that heat is a lot greener than the natural gas that is used to power boilers. The problem that we've got is the running costs for these heat pumps. They're very, very similar. They're very similar to if you had a boiler, but they require a complete and utter infrastructural upgrade. You need to get rid of your existing boilers to install new heat pump systems. You probably need to do a lot of your indoor piping and how the heat is distributed around the place. Heck, you might even need to dig up a bunch of ground to put a ground loop in. Or if you really want to get adventurous, you can install a borehole and make the most of some geothermal anomalies there. But the problem is it's the actual cost of running it is not that incentivizing. So what I'm very much expecting over the next 3 to 5 years is that those air source heat pumps and the ground source heat pump equipment is going to become cheaper. And if you can make it cheaper, then the actual paybacks that you get are so much faster. And every time you talk to a business, what's the return on investment? What's the percentage annual repayment? So if you can make that closer to that 5-year payback model, at the moment it's closer to 10 to 15. If you can make it 5, then we're having a really good conversation. And I believe that enhancing the heat pump supply network, cost of manufacturing, streamlining all this is what's going to make heat pumps the next big boom.
Interesting. And then what's the difference, just briefly, between those of us who aren't really running a small business? I'm working from home. That's not running a small business. But, between our home lives and our business lives, if you like, is it just scale at the end of the day?
Yeah, it is. And scale is so important with these things. There's some slight minor things like your home will probably be on single phase, whereas most businesses are on 3-phase. That can make a slight difference for energy efficiency, and then some kind for legislation. But in terms of the basic models, biggest challenge is scale. So when you've got things like generation, solar is so scalable. But when you've got things like LED lighting, say you just want to put LEDs in, or you want to make your insulation slightly more efficient, or maybe you want a few windows replaced to decrease your mu value, which is the heat loss coefficient, then that's not scalable. That's fine. That's great for everyone at home. Whereas with businesses, these great big generation assets, they are hugely scalable, because say you've got a 50 kilowatt system, a 50 grand solar PV system, that's probably about 45 kilowatts. It'll generate approximately 40,000 units. Whereas if you're at home, you're looking at a 7 kilowatt system. That's going to cost you easily £15,000. That's twice as expensive for the electricity that it's going to generate. So it's the generation scale. It's all about the scale. Generation sizing. It's all about the scale. Whereas at internal efficiencies, that's much more non-linear. Much more linear. Yeah. So it's good.
And you mentioned, it so depends on the business as well. I'm assuming, you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, a fish and chip shop 1 minute, a manufacturer the next minute. You could be dealing with any kind of business. So I'm sure it depends on use, in the same way that it depends on use for our home. What do we use our home for?
Oh, this is really important as well. What time of day do you use your home? So businesses, 9 to 5. Homes tend to be outside of these hours. So if we take a really easy approximation, let's talk about solar. Everyone's talking about solar. Solar generates electricity when the sun shines. So for businesses, that's great. For homes, that's problematic. So that's why the home residential PV industry is so big on batteries. But batteries are really expensive. So you end up having to buy additional pieces of kit just to make your existing piece of kit work. So that's another big part of unfairness between home life and industrial life, is that when are you consuming electricity?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Any pieces of advice then for somebody who might be a small business owner, or someone like me who isn't a business owner necessarily, or even somebody who's going into work and to a big business and not seeing the changes they'd like to see?
Rome wasn't built in a day. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? You can't be net zero tomorrow. We've got a UK net zero 2050 plan. So what that means is that we need to be looking at incremental changes. What can you actually do? What can you afford to do? And what do you have the motivation to do? The actual easiest thing that you can do, which is also the cheapest thing you can do, is just be a bit more mindful. Are you mindful of, are you turning off your lights? Are you leaving things on standby? Are you turning them off at the wall? When you're driving, are you driving efficiently? Did you need to drive? Just things like this. It's these behavioral mindset changes that can make some of the biggest savings and actually cost the least. So that's my basic bit of advice, is just think about yourself, and then maybe we can look at larger scale things.
Dr. James Crosby, thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely fascinating. I never knew anything about energy arbitrage, so you learn something new every day.
It was genuinely a pleasure, Philippa. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Well, keep in touch.